Hey Cam here at the Family Music Store. I'm here with Lumberjack Jack.
He's a lumberjack and he's okay.
Is that going to be a name?
That's your name.
Surely.
Who loves to wear shorts in the middle of winter in New Zealand where it's minus a million degrees. And we are looking today at the difference between because we are lucky enough to have Jack's Flash 1958 custom shop reissue Les Paul in the shop that we're having a look at, and we are comparing it to this here, which is a Chibson, as they are normally known, a commonly
Chinese
known.
Gibson.
So this is one of these kind of copies that you get from, you know, those sites where they make copies. It's a blatant forgery, basically. It's
a counterfeit Gibson guitar.
It's got a Gibson logo on the headstock. It's got "Made in USA" on the back, which it is not. And it is passing itself off as a Gibson, but it's not. So Jack is a bit of a Gibson expert, so he's going to tell us the differences and the things to look out for if you want to make sure, especially in the second-hand market, because as these things become more and more available on eBay and here in New Zealand, Trade Me and places like that, you want to make sure if you're spending money on one of these, because these sell for a couple of $100, but because it's got a Gibson logo on it, somebody could easily try and sell it for a couple of grand or $1.50, and you'd think you were getting a good deal. So we want to see what the differences are, what to spot, and how to make sure that you are getting the real thing if you are buying a guitar of this type. So take us through it, Jack.
Yep, so first off we've got the logo here. It varies from model to model what the actual material is made of. We'll throw up a picture of a direct one-by-one comparison here. But on the Chinese Gibsons, the Chibsons, they tend to be a bit blockier, a bit more uneven, and slightly less aesthetically pleasing. Also the Les Paul logo, the Les Paul model here, the moniker here, this is all one thickness of the line. On an authentic Gibson, it's more cursive, like a cursive pen writing, so it'll be thicker in some places and thinner in others. Another thing that's really common amongst fake Gibsons is that this here, the truss rod cover, will often be 3 screws, so 1, 2, 3. This guitar in particular gets a lot of things right, which makes me scared, because it seems like they're watching the people over there in these countries and companies are watching these videos, making corrections, but it's just they'll never quite get there, I don't think. Moving on, so we've got the fretboard next. We've got the proper trapezoid inlays, which is awesome. But if you look to the edge of the frets here, you'll see that the frets land over top of the binding. And so now on a real Gibson, bar a couple of exceptions were in the 2014, 2015, they'll always have the binding coming up onto the fret.
Just goes over the fret, just a little bit over the edge of the fret there.
I'll get a close up with this guitar, if you want to see. You'll see that the binding,
Comes
that
up.
right there is the fret nib. They call them fret nibs. And that's where the way they fret it, they fret the guitar, then they put the binding on afterwards. But these guitars, they bind the guitar, then they fret the guitar. So all Gibsons made in the USA will have a one-piece neck. Another part where this guitar kind of gets it right is that if you look up here, this transition here, there's often what's called a scarf joint, where it's 2 pieces of wood that's been glued along together so that it's cheaper to manufacture. Basically, you can use smaller pieces of wood. This guitar here is all one piece of wood through there, as you can see by the grain. But
So we're trying to point out all the things that are wrong with this guitar, but in this particular case,
they're getting better. They're getting better, but there's
quite
still
a few of these things.
If we look down towards this part of the guitar here, this is called the neck and the neck joint. We still found there's 2 distinct different shades of the colour. There's a scarf joint at this part of the guitar. So we've moved
normally
it from
a Gibson that would be one piece of wood.
That is all one piece of wood. Yeah, and I can show you on mine. All through there, there's no
joint.
There's no joint. It's kind of hard to see in this lighting, and also it's really worn and sort of faded the finish.
And we're just doing all the close-ups with a camera phone here, so it's not perfect. We're pretty low-tech here at the Family Music Store.
All right.
We're on a budget.
On a budget. All right. So we've got necks in here. We've got, this is the binding, which is correct for a Gibson. often they'll be flat along here, so it'll be all one sticking over, so you won't see any of the top material. This has got a maple top. Also, we've got...
Oh, so that's the maple top.
That's underneath, yes, yeah.
They're coming through under the binder.
A lot of fakes will just have it completely all the way through, so it'll be completely covering the top. Also, a couple of Gibsons from particular years, vintage ones will have that way. But for the most part, Gibsons will be like this. Another thing is the back. Yeah. So it looks like a one-piece back, but it's actually, so there's a seam here, and if you can't really see on the video, but there's actually a veneer on the top as well. It's it's subtly sanded in, so you can't really tell. But that's why you don't see the seam running through the entire body of the guitar.
So it makes the back look like it's a one piece.
Like
there's no joins, but actually that's just a veneer of wood stuck onto the various pieces that are glued together to make the body up.
Yep.
And you can see them in the insides in certain parts, like there's a join there.
If a Gibson is multiple pieces of the body, you'll see the lines coming through the body. They've never tried to do any veneers like this. Another thing is, the way that they carve their tops, if you look here, the carved top on this guitar actually dips in here, the neck joint. See how it's taller here and it sloops in? That's just a part of the way they make it. Whereas on a Gibson, this is a completely flat plane. Here. Flat. It's a different way they carve the tops on the guitars. So even if they manage to get everything else right, if any one of these things are wrong, it's not a Gibson guitar.
We want you to know that you've been warned.
Now obviously the pickups on this one are different. These are aftermarket pickups that the owner of this guitar has installed, so we'll disregard those. This came with pickups that look more like those. But so these are some Bill Lawrence pickups that the guy that owns this guitar has put in.
And like that's a good point. A lot of these times people buy these guitars to modify them and to make them into better playing guitars. So in this case, this has got a proper style bridge. See how it's just a dot at the top, whereas Epiphones and Chinese built guitars will have a slotted screw headstock, so you can adjust them with the height like this. These ones you adjust the thumb screws. But that's something that can be changed.
Yet another example of things to watch out for that this guitar doesn't actually have. It's a pretty accurate copy. It's pretty hard. Well, I knew that this guitar was a fake the first time I saw it because the owner told me, so I can't tell you whether I would have known just from looking at it, but it's pretty legit looking. It's pretty legit looking. On stage, no one will know. That's actually why I have this guitar here, because my friend is lending it to me for a Fleetwood Mac tribute band where I'm playing Peter Green and he uses a Les Paul and I don't have one, so I'm using this because the look will be closer. It'll look right, and he's got nice pickups on it, so it's going to sound pretty decent and it'll be fine. But I definitely do not endorse them making fake guitars.
Put your own name on it.
Yeah. Last time I checked, there was not. They seem to have gone. Like if you go onto those websites that I don't want to name because I don't want to advertise them, but you can't find them anymore. They're not flooded with Gibson
or at least
guitars.
not putting pictures of the headstocks.
Yeah.
At least that. Yeah.
So they seem to be a lot rarer, which is good, because what we don't want is these coming onto the second-hand market and nobody knowing the difference. So that's the thing that concerns me the most, is that you're going to go and buy one from eBay or Trade Me or whatever your country has in terms of your Craigslist or whatever, and not know that you're not buying a real Gibson, and you might see it for $1,500 and think it's a bargain, and then realise that you're really buying a $200 guitar.
Play authentic.
So those are the main differences.
Yep.
I hope that helps in your search for a nice guitar when you're going out and buying one. Thanks, Jack. Jack knows everything about Gibsons, so and make sure you subscribe to our videos. We'll be doing more and more of these kind of things, and we'll see you next time.